Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast, the number one source for news, analysis, and discussion on the Detroit Red Wings, the NHL, and all things hockey. Here are your hosts, Ryan Hanna, Brad Crisco, and Evan Lopsinger.
I have a new strategy.
For what?
What we put out into the universe. And you have left Brad and I to our own devices a couple times now, which is scary business.
The team does the same thing every year and we're surprised, and we do the same thing every year and we are also surprised. We need to learn and be better.
That's what I'm saying. Okay, so before I refused to do prospect profiles, right? I'm like, I'm not giving up on this season. I'm not throwing in the towel. And I was right to hold off because then, 2 separate 7-game win streaks. I think we start them soon here. Maybe next episode. Start prospect profiles. Pretend like we're giving up on the season. Yeah, because the math is still there. Like the trends are bad, the vibes are bad, but Detroit is still like firmly in a really, really, really tight playoff race. So we'll start the prospect profiles, and then Mrazek's going to come in and be prime Dominik Hasek. The entire team is going to start scoring like crazy. Erik Gustafsson's going to elevate to like Brian Rafalski levels. It's just, that's how you do it.
If I had any free money, I would put it all on that type of bet now.
Is all of your money tied up in what's the next? Actually, if you say something, it'll actually influence the market. So you're legally not allowed
to be very careful about what I say then.
Well, it's weird. The actual only stock that hasn't crashed is Petr Mrazek's.
We didn't think we'd do a post-trade deadline episode, and there wasn't a major trade. We lied to you. We said we'd only be here if there was something big that happened. But I don't know. I felt like we needed a discussion sooner rather than later.
Something big did happen, just not with the Red Wing.
That's right.
I think the reactions online were far more extreme than we were anticipating, which prompted the episode.
With that, let's jump right into it. An unexpected, but we're happy to be here. Welcome to the Winged Wheel Podcast. This episode, our trade deadline review episode. Here to talk to you about all things NHL Trade Deadline, the Detroit Red Wings, and what happened in the league. I'm one of your hosts, Ryan Hanna.
I'm Brad Crisco.
And I'm Evan.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
I do miss sitting further away from Brad, but it is good to have you back.
Good to be back.
Did you see the clip I sent you of Brad's, something where I would have looked at you and we would have started cracking?
Yes, I did look at that and I had a good chuckle. That was funny.
Ryan and I both realized it at the same time, but it didn't have quite the same impact without your smirk just ready to...
Because Brad's good. Like, he'll power through it.
That's a professional. He's a professional.
On this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast, we're going to be talking trade deadline, the one deal that has happened between last episode and now, a quiet deadline for the Red Wings, and what that means for the team, the future, the Yzer plan, whether this was expected or not, whether this was smart or not, what happened around the league, and more before we jump into overtime. Very quickly, patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast. If you want to support the show, you get benefits like our bonus overtime episodes, which include bloopers, any questions we didn't answer on the main show, stories we let loose, have fun. It's a good time. You're automatically entered into all of our giveaways. We give away 2 tickets to every Detroit Red Wings home game going directly to our Patreon supporters. Additionally, you get access to our Winged Wheel Podcast Patreon exclusive Discord. So again, patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast. So it was past 2 p.m., I believe. And we were barreling towards what I thought was going to be a nothing deadline, which we kind of talked about was more or less what we expected. And then probably the weirdest trade that you could have imagined came up. And I'm going to preface this by saying the difference between me and Evan, where Evan is Lobstradamus and he predicts the future, is that he knows where to put his money where his mouth is. Like, you know when to do that, and that's why you get things right. Like a week ago, I actually had the thought of, what if Petr Mrazek was a Red Wing again in the future? But I never said it because I'm like, that would be stupid, and how would that even happen? Well, the Detroit Red Wings traded Joe Veleno. His time in the Winged Wheel is over. We talked for a long time that he was kind of uniquely poised to be moved based on his position or lack thereof on the team, his age, his contract, for Craig Smith on an expiring deal, and Petr Mrazek, 1 year left, $4.25 million from Chicago. And that's the only deal of the day for the Red Wings. So let's start with that deal. Reactions, analysis. Where are you at on it?
Confused, mostly. I shouldn't say I'm confused, but I don't love it. Let's get the obvious part out of the way. This is not a needle mover trade in either direction. The reason we're here and we were prompted to record early was because I think due to a lot of pent up frustration, this trade got the attention of a big trade because 4-game losing streak coupled with this is the only deal. It has a feeling to it like it's a big trade, but it's really not. Veleno was healthy scratch last game. He hasn't developed into anything more than a serviceable fourth liner. We love the guy, but really, what was his future here? He could play on the fourth line forever for $1 million a season, sure. But is that going to get you anywhere? No, you can replace those guys in free agency for league minimum every year. And maybe one of them does something more than Veleno did. Craig Smith, for the remainder of this season, is a solid upgrade on what Veleno's been providing. He's got some tangible offense, which is sorely lacking on the bottom line. He might even play third line. He's got probably a good enough skill set to do it. It's only a rental 1 year, but at least if you're in a playoff push, you get a guy who's got a bunch more points in less games. Sure. I'll start by saying I love Petr Mrazek. He was one of my guys when he was in Detroit. Like, I was a big Petr Mrazek fan. So the nostalgia side of me is really happy to see him back in the winged wheel. But I don't understand him being included at all. I understand Talbot and Lyon have been bad lately. That doesn't inspire confidence in a playoff race. Totally fair to maybe toss the idea around of bringing another goalie to shore it up. Now, mind you, I probably would have flipped one of them for another asset, seeing what the trade market was, but there were basically no goalies moved, so it doesn't seem like that segment of the market was super hot. But Petr Mrazek cost $4.25 million and has not been good this year. He was really good last year. So maybe you're hoping that gets rekindled a little bit. Maybe there's an argument Chicago's so bad that it made him look a lot worse than he was. But the underlyings don't even agree with that. And brother, let me tell you, this defense isn't going to do much more to prop him up if that's an issue. And then you've got the whole other year of $4.25 million. Again, the Wings have lots of space. It's not like absolutely nuking their season next year. But you just unloaded Husso, and I'm not entirely convinced Mrazek's that significant of an upgrade on what Husso was providing. I'm sure he's at least better, but not by leaps and bounds, and you're paying almost the same price. So I assume all this is the Wings saw Smith as an upgrade. They didn't see a future Veleno, and they're betting that it was Chicago that was causing the problems for Mrazek, which all fair. I just don't fully agree with the Mrazek part of it.
Even if you think that's the case where he's a symptom of being in Chicago, is Petr Mrazek off Chicago a better bet than what you've seen out of Cam Talbot and Alex Lyon? Maybe in the short term, since things have been sliding terribly, but over the long term, I think it's all very interchangeable, dare I say, duplicates of one another to some extent. And now it also brings up a lot of questions about Sebastian Cossa. Does this solidify that he is now in Grand Rapids for another year? I would think so, barring something else happening. It's just, when I saw this trade, was trying to squint to see if I was getting the names right. And sure, Smith is an upgrade over Veleno this year, but he's 35 years old. His time in the league is running to an end. I thought this was going to be part of another trade, manifesting another trade, and then nothing happened. So I leave today very confused on the purpose of this trade.
What I'll say first was, if we were running it back, we should have just brought back Gus Nyquist and just brought back all the boys, honestly. just for the vibes.
Nyquist makes a lot of sense. He was exceptional last year and is now was on a team in Nashville that couldn't score a goal to save their lives. Minnesota is making a great bet that Gus Nyquist is going to find his game.
And Athanasiou was right there on Chicago. They could have just tagged him along.
Hey, bring Bertuzzi back too. While they can take the same flight, save some money.
Just get the band back together. I don't like that they half-assed this.
Bring Mantha just for the golf, honestly.
Yeah,
like how he is. Okay, so for the trade though, first, Brad, what you said, this isn't a needle mover. It's not a big trade either direction, and that's my take on it. At best, I think I feel neutral on this trade, and at worst, I've been kind of like, oh, well, I don't necessarily agree, but it's not terrible. It's not incredible. What Yzerman said on Mrazek was essentially what you were speculating, Brad, which was, yeah, goalies are voodoo, and they think that Chicago maybe had something to do with his performance. They've seen him do well, and he's done amazingly in Chicago before. He's done amazingly in Carolina before. The reason Mrazek's just never stuck at that, top goalie status is because he can't do it consistently, which is a story of every goalie in the league. But they're betting that between him and Talbot and Lyon for the rest of the season, they hope they can find something. But more so, they were talking about the future. I'm with you, Brad. I don't really like the extra year at 4.25 based on his performance, which statistically this season is among the worst in the league. But they liked it because they believe he can be better than that and more about what we've seen from him in the past. And they think relative to what goalies are getting on the open market, they weren't going to do much better than that, if at all better than that, on a one-year deal.
But why do they need a goalie?
Because Yzerman said he wants to take a conservative approach with Sebastian Cossa. And if he has a great, finish to the season and hopefully deep playoff run with Grand Rapids and then great offseason and great preseason and he forces their hand, then this doesn't stop them from making another move. And I believe him on that. That's fully believable. But that way you have some insurance. That's at least their thinking.
I will say this on Cossa. I don't mind this trade from the Cossa standpoint. We now know the Red Wings tandem for next year. It's Talbot and Mrazek. You can call it a 1A, 1B. I'll call it a 2A, 2B, but that's the situation. If there's no point Cossa comes up next season, that's a positive on two fronts. It means A, Mrazek and Talbot are staying healthy, and B, they're playing well. Because the Red Wings are at the point with Cossa, if he's doing well, the first sign of one of these guys faltering next season, they're getting the yank, Kossa's coming up, and they, I would assume, would give him the chance to run with it. If one of these guys falters next year and Mrazek's an 880 goalie or Talbot's injured all the time or vice versa, okay, they're both on expiring contracts. You can bury them or you can trade them and just bring Cossa up. Like I'm not worried about it at all from that standpoint because both ends of the spectrum have a positive. Either they suck, like we think is a likely scenario for at least one of them, and then you just bring Cossa up. Or neither of them suck. And if you get a full season of solid goaltending, odds are the Red Wings are having a pretty good season. So I'm okay with it from that standpoint.
And honestly, on Veleno, with apologies to a good friend of the show, Darren, there's just too much of a passenger status most of the time with him, like cardio games. He'd have a look here and there of like a couple good games maybe, and then it was just like 18 consecutive periods of, did Veleno play today kind of feel. So I feel for him, and I hope a change of scenery and a bigger opportunity will do well, and maybe he gets that in Chicago, but I'm not pressed about that one. So essentially, the calculus here is that the Red Wings paid taking on 1 year of $4.25 million from Mrazek to upgrade from Veleno to Craig Smith. And I do like Craig Smith as a depth piece. I have the same questions as Evan. That's not a long-term thing, and what's the contract status going to be after this season? But for the rest of this year, if you think that rental could help get you the couple extra points, remains to be seen. I think it depends more on Mrazek than anything else. Sure, but a funny trade for a quiet day.
I will also point out, because it's a point of optimism we talked about last episode, now that the dust has settled from the deadline and everything, for the long-term outlook of this team. Yeah, it sucks they lost Fischer on waivers, Not the end of the world.
To the Columbus Blue Jackets,
Yeah.
for the record.
Yeah. Again, not the end of the world. We love the guy. He was not like Veleno. He was doing cardio most nights. And Veleno going in this trade, Soderblom and Kasper and Berggren are going to be seeing a lot of ice for the rest of this season. They are now core parts of this playoff run. And at least one or two of them, any given game, are probably going to be playing a fairly prominent role. So if you're looking at, okay, let's get some young guys playing meaningful games to develop them for the future. Well, Seider and Raymond finally got that last year. Berggren, Kasper, Soderblom are getting that this year. Well, obviously Edvinsson and Johansson as well. So this is a very, very young team all of a sudden, which is something we've been begging for forever. And it's nice because by and large, these guys aren't disappointing.
Well, they actually got older with this trade.
With this trade. But,
and I hate to say it, but like that, we're losing eyebrows. We're losing the recipes.
Yeah, do not be buying on eyebrows right now.
No.
Sorry, I interrupted your thought.
Yeah, that's right. Well, now I'm trying to think.
We ended your thought with, don't buy eyebrows.
This is what Evan and I are here for, Brad, to interrupt your whatever it is, your fluff with hard-hitting analysis.
That's
Well,
right.
I'm just thinking about no more Athanasiou, Fabry, Veleno.
That's what I'm saying,
That's
man.
a lot of eyebrow to lose.
Thinner and
Who's
thinner
going to
out
be on the market this summer? You got to replenish a little bit.
Maybe we can tie that in with our prospect profiles. Eyebrow watch.
there. I carry on.
I'm doing my scouting this year just looking at headshots.
But to jump in, yeah, like the team does have a need for forwards, and those guys are there's one less obstacle in the way, so to speak. And I do mean it when I say I like the upgrade from Veleno to Craig Smith. Whether the team getting younger, aside from what Evan rightfully pointed out with this trade, the team getting younger overall is a universal positive. Well, we talked many episodes now, and especially last episode, that's not going to be a consistent, solid linear improvement game over game over game. There's going to be regressions. Guys need to learn. You saw Kasper become the victim of the whole team slumping. Then he slumped a little bit out of the break. And Johansson, by God, he works his butt off out there, but he's getting kind of banged around a lot physically. It's hard for him to take those second pair minutes consistently. The team needs to add some blue line help as well to help those deployments too. But all in all, I agree. It's good that they get younger. The bigger question, and I think what has a lot of Red Wings fans angry, this is one of those episodes where people are going to be angry no matter what you say one way or the other. But the reason people are angry is because, one, they're on a 4-game skid right now. If the Red Wings had won 2 and got a loser point in these 4 games, there would be a whole different vibe. Because no matter what, we were coming into this deadline with the most likely outcome. We were talking for weeks and weeks, and in the preview, the most likely outcome is it was going to be a quiet deadline. Like the market was just not going to lend to, here are things that make sense for the Red Wings. There's a couple players that moved around, and we'll talk about them, that would have made sense for the Red Wings. And then you look at what they went for, and it's either Detroit didn't have what they went for, or, Detroit just didn't make the trade. They just weren't the ones to win that trade, however you want to look at it. But Yzerman said in his press availability, like, you were looking at prices where multiple firsts and multiple prospects was the price you had to pay for guys who would have a mid to long-term future, guys with term, guys who are younger and could put into a future cup window, hopefully, for this team. That's the price you had to pay. If you're dealing just a first or just a top prospect, what was that getting you? It was getting you a third, fourth liner. Yzerman even says, we have those. Like, I'm not giving up a first-round pick for the third or fourth liner. Like,
Some nights we have 3 lines of third liners.
most nights.
Lately.
I joked, the Red Wings have 1.5 good defensemen each night, and maybe that was a disservice to 0.33 of a defenseman? Like, I'm not that far off right now with where they're at. If you're Colorado picking up Brock Nelson, or if you're Toronto picking up, Scott Laughton, sure, then you dish those first-round picks or high-end prospects. But it doesn't mean people don't have the right to be angry. I'm frustrated. I want to see this team be doing better too. But the answer wasn't going to be to get rentals. I would have loved to have seen a Rantanen. Probably would have really liked to have seen a Cozens. I would have liked to have seen maybe even a flyer on a Middlestat, but do anything to get into the playoffs this year. We saw the prices this year. This seller's market was wild.
It'll be interesting to see how the dust settles on the teams that made definitive directional moves. The teams who are saying, we're pushing all our chips in and we're going for it. And everybody knows who those teams are. It'll also be interesting to see the teams like Boston who move on from their captain, and what happens with them. And then we've got the teams like the Red Wings who kind of just stayed pat and didn't do anything. I really don't know how I feel about this in terms of the remainder of the season. So I think once all this gets settled out and how things end up, once I know how things happen, I'll know how to feel. It was what I'm essentially trying to say.
Yeah, I'm starting to understand how you do this predict the future thing. Is you wait for it to happen.
I got two thoughts. One, Ryan's absolutely right. When you
Clip it.
It's rare.
That's your job.
Yeah. But even Yzerman said so in his press conference. I'm not giving up for some premiums unless you tell me we're going to the finals. This team, even if they
finals of what?
The in-season tournament.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep. You know what? I'll take conference finals at this point. But you're not like, I would put the benchmark at anything at a second round value or better in terms of a rental would make no sense for Detroit for where they're sitting. Again, I was on board if they wanted to give up a third, fourth, fifth for a depth forward. Like if they had just given up a fourth round pick to get Craig Smith, great. No problem. I'd have been on board with it. But those weren't the prices, number one. And two, getting to what Evan was saying about Boston, Ryan, you got to remind me, did I go on my big wish about Pastrnak on the main episode or the Patreon exclusive last episode?
I honestly can't remember. Time melds together, but we've been talking about it a lot.
I said if Boston ever goes full rebuild, Detroit should be picking up the phone about David Pastrnak every day.
Well, apparently you can do divisional trades and it doesn't matter anymore.
No, and
when
Boston
when
and
it's
Detroit,
guaranteed that the other team's going to suck, then
Yes.
it doesn't quite matter.
yeah, Boston and Detroit are going opposite directions now. Like Detroit has already, we're just talking about the standings, past the Bruins. Boston just, like, they were the heaviest sellers. Like, Marchand's gone. Carlo's gone. Coyle's gone. Brazeau was gone. And I think I'm even forgetting one. Like, they went all out. They very clearly signaled what direction they're heading. Again, the Red Wings should be picking up the phone every day until David Pastrnak is in a red and white jersey.
Well, they have Swayman, they have McAvoy, they have Pastrnak. I don't think DJ Bean said it on the show last episode when we did this in the preview. They're not getting there. It's wishful thinking, and I fully agree with you. You go balls to the wall for that the same way you might for, if Rantanen had made it to free agency or if Marner is there in free agency. Of course, I just think Boston's going to try to retool on the fly here.
This kind of strikes me as a Marchand initiated trade, right? Like they still have some interesting pieces that they could build around. I think really their demise, well, they've got a starting goalie in David Pastrnak.
And McAvoy,
that's what I'd be building around.
Empty outside of that.
Well, that gets to my point of I think a lot of it is all self-inflicted though.
It depends on the contract that Marchand wanted, and I think that's how you would look at it, whether it was him who initiated it. I think he wanted to stay a Bruin, but at what price and for how long, right? So.
Yeah.
It is probably worth pointing out. There's no rule that says he can't go back to Boston on July 1.
Yeah.
So, not saying it's going to happen, but
talking about the fans' frustration, though, because I maintain, like, you look at this rationally, and part of my bigger point that maybe I didn't really illustrate well enough there was all those things about this market were true before, and we saw it come to fruition in this trade market. But at the same time, when people are, like, livid today, and they're saying, what is this team doing to take that big step? You say they have holes at every position. How's that going to get solved? The patience is running out. It's been however many years, and then however many years since Yzerman got here, 6 now. When? And you guys know me. You can boil down the ones and the zeros, and if you consider this, and you have to be patient with that, all you want. But at the end of the day, they're not wrong to be upset. It is taking a ton of time, and at some point, there needs to be kind of those results. And it's one of those situations where it's nuanced, multiple things can be true. And at some point, Yzerman does have to find a way to pull this team up the ladder. And whether that's a trade or a big free agency signing or something bold, I didn't see anything today that was like quite obviously, oh, this was a massive miss on him. They didn't have Logan Stankoven in 2 firsts. And if Rantanen even wanted to come.
Well, they could have had Stankoven.
Yeah, I walked into that one, didn't I?
Yeah, they could have.
They could have. But the frustration is there and it's palpable. And a lot of it, again, it's colored by the context. It's 4 straight losses. One of the most recent loss in the middle of the game, we got the Walman news, which nothing new happened there. I mean, the trade happened, but nothing new happened relevant to the Red Wings. It was just more salt in an old wound. And we'll talk about that trade on the other side of the break here. But it's the context has everyone frustrated, and I get it. And I don't disagree. Something does have to change at some point, but I just look at this trade deadline and I'm like, there's a couple moves I would have maybe have liked to have seen, but if the prices were actually that high and that's what we saw, then I don't want rentals. You know, I would have, Byram, great. If Detroit was the one to get Cozens, great. Depending on that price. They don't have a Josh Norris to have given up. But you're not trading for Brock Nelson. You're not trading for Scott Laughton. I don't know. It's complicated. I don't have clear feelings on this one way or the other.
I think the biggest L Detroit took today had nothing to do with them. It's very rare superstars get to free agency, and it was looking like 2 were going to hit this summer and Detroit could go all in. That number is now 1. Rantanen is no longer an option, so love him or hate him, the Red Wings' number 1 priority right now should be all in on Mitch Marner come July 1. Because looking around the league, because the more I watch Vancouver and the more I watch clips and the more I watch games, Elias Pettersson's broken, the expensive one.
This feels so good.
I'm not saying.
Were you nervous at this deadline at all?
Nope.
I'm not saying he can't rebound, and I'm not saying he won't be a 90.
Well, you'd have to shoot to get a rebound.
Terrific point, and he doesn't seem to want to do that.
We did miss you, you know?
I know.
But you look around the league, who's going to be available? Cozens is off the board. Pettersson's almost unplayable at this point.
And Yzerman talked a lot about being hard to play against. And Pettersson's.
Yeah, and I know Marner gets a rap for his playoff performances, but that guy has received Selke votes in his career. Like just because he's small doesn't mean he's easy to play against. But man, there are not a lot of options out there for what Yzerman needs to do. That's I think where the biggest L occurred today, and that is not Yzerman's fault. There was nothing he could have done about that. Like you said, Cozens would have been nice. That would have been a fun reclamation project. They didn't have a Josh Norris caliber player that Buffalo would want. Rantanen, Detroit might, for all we know, could have been like, we'll trade for him and give him $14 million right now. And he just went, no, thank you. And after seeing the price they paid, that would have scared me a little bit, to be honest. Yeah, it's going to be hard. Whatever, if Mitch Marner's highest offer from another team is 13.5 over 7 years, Stevie's got to offer him 14.5. Like I'm looking at the state of this rebuild, and his drafting and developing has been excellent. Like the base is there, but we've beat it to death, so I won't go on an hour-long tirade about it. They need a star player to add to this group. I see one option. And when you have one option available, that's not a good thing.
The worst thing, if we're having the Mitch Marner conversation, I think the worst thing for the Red Wings in the Mitch Marner perspective would be is if the Leafs lose in the first round and he's got like double-digit points, because then the Leafs are going to be forced to have to re-sign him at any amount of money he wants.
He's the biggest winner of the day no matter what, the fact that Rantanen's off the table. I'm sure he would have liked to have seen Rantanen take more than 12, but it's 12 in a no income tax state.
And he's going to an absolute wagon of a team.
Yeah. So I agree in the sense that that's a pretty big L that the Red Wings took. Something that I do think is Yzerman's fault, that is the biggest loss of the day, is it's a two-parter. One, it starts with the pro scouting that put them in this situation.
Yeah.
And two, it's the fact that none of Tarasenko or Hall or Gustafsson or these bad contracts that you need is a word. It would have been really great to offload them. And in a seller's market where it was hard for teams to try to find depth, I get it. Like the book is out. These guys aren't good. They're not productive players on a bad team. So why would teams trade for them? But it would have been a really big win if Steve Yzerman could have found a buyer or even offloaded them for a late round pick. I don't know what the price is, for a Tarasenko or a Hall. It's complicated a little bit by Tarasenko's trade protection. I get that. But I was looking for that kind of thing.
Well, that deal with
And
Chicago
Hall's
was
10-team no trade, I should say.
Yeah, I said, and look at that Chicago trade. The opportunity was right there. Tarasenko's maybe not a good option, but you could have gotten Chicago to take back a Gustafsson or a Hall. The Red Wings were eating more money with Mrazek, and you could have been like, okay, well, you're going to take $3 million of Justin Hall, or 2.5 or whatever Eric Gustafsson makes. Yeah, like the opportunity was there, but outside of that very specific circumstance, yeah, I was hoping one of those three guys would have went. NHL teams aren't oblivious. Those three guys are borderline unplayable right now. They're not bad. If the Red Wings had other options at these positions, probably would not be dressing. Like, they are awful. There was 2 Utah goals. I saw out of the corner of my eye the goal, and I went, I guarantee they're on the ice, and I look over, there they are.
Yeah. That's the thing. Like, broad strokes, are the Red Wings in, a cup contending window if the pro scouting moves were twice as good or half as bad? Not cup contending, but they probably are, a good bit better here in their little mini jump that they're doing where they're in this wild card race. Absolutely. And I think fans are right to be frustrated by that. Sure. But the pro scouting part of this is something that needs to be fixed no matter what moving forward. Like, you can't be going into every offseason with multiple eligible names where it's like, yeah, a buyout would be an obvious choice for this team. And that's what we're looking at. So,
like, to put it in perspective, you as a listener sitting there listening, if you have any questions about whether or not this is a problem for the Red Wings, you're staring at an offseason where the Red Wings have a ton of cap space. Are you super excited, or is there a lot of trepidation there about what they're going to do with it? I'm nervous more than I'm excited because I can see a lot more JT Compher, Ben Sherratt, Justin Halls coming on the team next year. And I mean, if you get one Mitch Marner, it cancels it all out for the most part. But man, it's tough. It's the biggest weakness in the organization by a mile, and I don't think it's particularly close.
Oh, the pro scouting, absolutely.
The one reason why I think fans have some frustrations with the trade deadline as well is because it's another mechanism to catch teams making emotional moves, right? Like, you catch teams thinking that they're going to make the playoffs, or they're starting to fold their season and they're trading players to get assets back. The fact that the Red Wings make one move where you really kind of have to squint to understand it, I can totally see people's frustrations. They want a direction with this team, and making a horizontal move leaves a lot of people upset.
I will push back on that a little bit. I think the direction was made very clear today, and that direction is the future. I think Yzerman showed he's well aware of what this year is. It will be great if we make the playoffs, but the vision is not about this year. We are not pushing futures in the table. We are not getting rid of picks, prospects, at least none significant. Young guys are getting more ice time. Yeah, it's gonna suck if we miss this year, but there is all the benefits the Red Wings have for years to come are still within the organization.
I do like the point, though.
Yeah,
like trade deadlines, it is an emotional, irrational time. And frankly, it's not even irrational. If you're a team and you want to win the Stanley Cup, you want to know how many bad contracts there were the day the Florida Panthers lifted the Stanley Cup? Zero. Because it does not matter, because the Stanley Cup is above your head. So if you get a team who's willing to overpay for something, then yeah, absolutely you do it. That said, fans weren't looking to sell Rasmussen for the most part.
When I saw the prices, I kind of started wondering.
I agree. But fans were looking to buy something.
And I'm not necessarily saying the Red Wings sort of sold assets. Obviously, we've seen it before with Hronek, where the price comes in and you're like, we weren't going to, but we're doing it now.
Yeah.
I could totally understand that, but Steve Yzerman's a smart guy, and he's made some interesting moves and has caught GMs in the wrong time and has made them pay for that. I think there was a lot of teams who were very uncertain on what they're doing, and I think he could have capitalize on some of that.
He's been on the other end of
Buffalo.
it too.
Yes.
Cozens, Peterka, Byram, make your pick. He should have been making, for all we know, he should have been making phone calls every day.
Okay, but just to jump the gun here, I'm borrowing from after the break, the Cozens trade. Norris was the central piece there. The Red Wings don't have a Norris. They have Larkin, and then they have nothing until Casper or Danielson. Buffalo wanted NHL ready, so that means Casper. Are you giving up Casper in a trade for Cozens? Yes or no right now?
Cozens? No.
Then that's that. Peterka's different.
I would have considered
Oh,
Peterka.
Peterka.
I would have considered Peterka.
Yeah.
Which means leads me to believe Buffalo would not be interested.
I would normally say
Peterka's
yes, but oh my God, is Adams bad at his job? He might have.
Yeah, true.
right. So like I'm led to believe that the Peterka price was substantially higher there.
I would think so. And for Buffalo's sake, I would hope so.
Yeah.
Could have just drafted him.
Oh, we really didn't need you. We just needed a soundboard, and you would have been
You
just as
have
correct.
Just let me know.
These are all programmed for fart noises, and you know
Oh,
that.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
What
that's
do you think
true.
I do when Brad's talking? It's
That's
just me
true.
here. But that's the thing. Like, are you moving on from Casper? You said something last episode. There's the frustration and the anger, which is real, and then you remove yourself from it, and you take the rational approach, and you take emotion out of it. Last free agency, there's a lot of frustration that Detroit sat out. It is good that they didn't spend on Stamkos. It is good that they didn't spend on Marchand. It's good that they didn't spend on most of those guys who got those big contracts. And I know for a fact that the Red Wings were in on a lot of those guys, and they backed out because they're like, this is insane. This trade deadline, there would be no function to paying a first and a first plus unless it came with term. I'm not saying Yzerman handled it perfectly. No, I have a lot of gripes with where we're at now, but save for, assuming a lot of what the back end conversations were, which we just don't. That's not the way the NHL works. This isn't the NBA. Yeah, you would have loved to have gotten Rantanen. Yeah, you would have loved to have gotten Cozens. Yeah, you would have loved to have gotten, maybe one or two other guys. But by and large, you're looking at rentals here. And so it's the two-sided coin where both things are true. One, they weren't worth the prices. Two, you got to do something eventually. And Yzerman said, I take full responsibility for where this team is at. And he has to take the fans' frustration, and he still has to operate in the team's best interest.
You're right. He's right. I got hammered when I said I was happy the Red Wings sat out that free agency. I said Nashville's not going to be as good as people. I didn't think they were going to be this bad. But again, and it's the same thing with this deadline. We talked about it last episode. You have to take the emotion out of it. Yeah, it would have been nice to get a Brock Nelson, a Scott Laughton, and pick whoever the hell you want. Nobody in the right mind is paying those prices if you're in Detroit's position. Nobody. And Yzerman was right to take the emotion out of it and go, it is better if we sit on our hands for the most part today, the way things were going. Again, I hate where this team is at. It's boring. They suck. I want to hit the gas pedal. But you have to hit it at the right time. You have to. Just because you want to doesn't mean you should. I'm sure Yzerman wanted to go nuts in that free agency. And like you said, saw the prices and went, no. I'm sure he wanted to do some things today, looked at the prices and went, no. Sometimes the best move you can make is the one you didn't make.
It's complicated. More after this break when we hear from the sponsors of the Winged Wheel podcast. Losing your hair is frustrating, but just because it's happening doesn't mean you have to accept it. If you've been noticing your hairline creeping back in your team photo or things feeling thinner under your helmet, you can do something about it. That's where Hims comes in. Hims provides you with convenient and quality access to a range of hair loss treatments that work. Choose from personalized chewable, oral, spray, and serum treatments to find out what works best for you. Best part? The entire process is 100% online, meaning no awkward doctor visits, just real results from the comfort of your couch. Just answer a few quick questions and a medical provider will determine if treatment is right for you. If prescribed, your treatment is shipped directly to your door for free. No insurance is needed, and one low price covers everything, from treatments to ongoing care. And right now, you can take the first step toward thicker, fuller hair. Start your free online visit today at hims.com/wingedwheel. That's HIMS.com/wingedwheel for your personalized hair loss treatment options. hims.com/wingedwheel. Results vary based on studies of topical and oral minoxidil and finasteride. Prescription products require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if prescription is appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for full details and important safety information. Welcome back. If you're still listening and haven't punched the stereo in your car, more on the Red Wings before we jump into the rest of the league. The presser from Steve Yzerman, there was a lot of him just kind of saying what we talked about, which is, the prices, you're not going to mortgage futures just for this season. If prices were cheaper, then yeah, maybe, et cetera, et cetera. But he also talked about something that I thought was interesting. And someone asked him about being tough to play against. I can't remember if it was Will or not, but being tough to play against. And he agreed. He said this team is too easy to play against right now. They're too soft, essentially. And he said, I watched the Four Nations. I think fighting is going to make a comeback. Like, everyone liked what they saw there.
That's amazing.
If you're wondering why Evan showed up for an emergency episode.
And yet, he let Ryan Reeves clear waivers today.
Someone said, why did they claim Reeves? Because he's a terrible hockey player.
He is legitimately the worst hockey player in the NHL by a comfortable margin.
But if you want to know what he talked a lot about the size of the players that from his years when he played, and guys who weren't even that size, but they played like they were big. Gives you a little bit of an idea of what Yzerman's going to be looking for. Probably not with all players, but by and large, and how he's going to build this roster. So that can come up in a different way, because I think there's ways to do it effectively, and there's ways to be hard to play against, like the Florida Panthers, or the worst case scenario here is like the Tyler Wright size draft that got us and I'm sorry to say, but Rasmussen pick.
Don't remind anybody of that second round either.
Yep. So I don't think that that's necessarily what he's looking at here, but all in all, the way the league is trending, and then we've been saying for how many weeks, months, years now, the Red Wings just get bullied, like dummied. I don't know. I get that you look at these little moments, but you see Logan Cooley cross-check Edvinsson in the side back of his knee last night, and I was just like, how many times is this going to happen? And it shouldn't have to be Larkin or Edvinsson or whatever. The team, I do think, if you weren't sure before Yzerman said it, they're going to trend to be a little bit meaner to play against.
Wasn't the whole thing of his last few years, though, 200-foot character guys? I'm sorry, this isn't an indictment on the leadership group, but at the same time, it is a little bit. They have a lot of big players. You look at Sherratt, he's that guy. We don't want to see Seider and Edvinsson being that guy, but they're certainly big enough to be that guy. Rasmussen. I mean, before it all went down, he's not a small guy. Comfer's not a small guy. They have size on this team, and they don't use it. I know that's been a huge talking point with them and Soderblom. Hey, buddy, you're 6'8". We know you're a skill guy. That's great. Can you scare the shit out of someone every once in a while, please? It's hard for me to reconcile what he's saying when you look at the team, because this is a roster that has the capability of being a real pain in the ass to play against. And they don't, because every team has your Patrick Kanes and your Lucas Raymonds, the guys that you really don't want to see in those scrums because obvious reasons. But even a guy like DeBrincat, he's little, he's in the middle of most of it. Looks like he's in the shit more than a guy like Rasmussen is.
Yeah, actually. I mean, he plays a lot more, but yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know. I get what Yzerman's saying, and he's right. You want to have that Florida Panthers F you attitude. And you accept the penalties because teams don't push you around and all that. But, I mean, did you just misidentify all the guys you got that are supposed to do that? Because they ain't doing it.
It's one of those things I genuinely believe you either have or you don't have. You either are going to be the bully or you're going to get bullied out there. There's very few teams that you see that will just become that because other players on their team are that. I think the players who can manifest that, like the Tkachuks, are like, that's a special level of that trait. And like looking at the Red Wings, like I don't see anyone with that innate ability really. And I think if I was to line up the entire team and say, you are not allowed to fight, there'd be no one there maybe other than Patrick Kane. Because I think if Patrick Kane gets punched, he might turn into dust. But there, at some point, there's no excuse. Like if you see something happen or someone takes liberties from a teammate, you gotta just kind of accept, like, I'm gonna go in there and try and do something. Probably gonna get my face caved in, but that's what this is a big boy league.
Seider took a couple shots to the face from Sergachev, who made the funniest crying face yet.
I saw that and I was like, that's a meme. Someone's making a meme of that face.
Oh, you're gonna cry. Like, and I get why I would probably be annoyed in his situation too. But he went and gave Seider a couple free shots, and Seider did the right thing. He drew a penalty. Red Wings didn't do anything with it. They lost the game. You look at the individual moments, and you're like, yeah, the right thing is to draw the penalty. But I'm sorry, like the cross check from a kid to Edvinsson's knee, and like the
Logan Cooley should have been in the 12th row.
Like, it is caveman mentality, but at some point, like you
got to just kind of have to do it. Like if you're the smallest guy out there and you're looking at an absolute mutant who just took a liberty of your teammate, you got to go over there and get caved.
How many bad penalties do the Tampa Bay Lightning and Florida Panthers take in a year? A ton. Are they doing all right? Yep. Now I understand with Detroit's different. There are
a couple differences.
Their penalty.
Like, yeah, name one.
Their penalty kill, for starters, can handle all of those, and I get that it's not a 1-to-1, but
they had their best penalty killers between the pipes, Brad.
You're just making me sad.
That was a Red Wings draft pick.
But circling back to Yzerman's point about getting harder to play against, you know how you get harder to play against? You get better.
Yeah.
If the Red Wings were operating at the 10th best penalty kill in the league, do you think Edvinsson or Seider have any hesitation to punch those guys in the face?
100%.
Throw
agree.
Logan Cooley into the second deck? Like, they're probably a lot more comfortable doing it. But they have to very correctly wonder, if we go shorthanded here, am I costing us the game? And it's a problem. Ben Schrott, I rip him a lot for not being that guy when he's supposed to be that guy. He's aware of the issues. He might be thinking that. Like, it's a very real issue. So, yes, Yzerman is correct. They need to get harder to play against. Couple that statement, though, with their pro scouting department, I have major concerns with that statement.
Well, they passed the first test. Ryan Reeves, hopefully.
That's right.
Did clear or has cleared?
Cleared.
Okay. So
we're good.
test 1 has been passed.
Well, I mean, I heard, and don't get mad at me, Evan, but I heard Elias Pettersson's really working on developing some snarl this summer.
Yeah, they saw him in the octagon working on his grappling, I'm sure. Grappling how to shoot the hockey puck.
They actually thought they saw him working out front on someone's front lawn, but it was actually one of those wacky waveable inflating arm tube men.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll see the direction the Red Wings move in, and it's one of those things where it's like you can complain, and there's good points either way, but the Red Wings do need to, one way or another, be harder to play against, and I think you're right, Brad. Like, it makes it easier to do when you're a better hockey team, so it all comes back to you got to build a better hockey team. Okay, we're going to talk about some other big trades, and I'm going to start with this one, and I have a lot to say about it, and my God, am I tired of it. Jake Walman traded from the San Jose Sharks. Jake Walman traded from the San Jose Sharks to the Edmonton Oilers for a conditional first and Berglund. Walman was traded with a second by Detroit to unload him in the offseason to San Jose. So Mike Greer, who I in the past have said, I don't really know about the moves he's making for San Jose, has grabbed the top of my head and dunked on me like it's a poster in someone's dorm room multiple times now with this one deal. That was a massive, if you want to know why Red Wings fans are upset, because they're watching, a big part of it is they're watching that trade come up in their face again, and it garnered a first-round pick. Here is a long-winded, so I apologize in advance, but the whole read on the situation, which we've talked about a lot of this before, but Walman, after he came back from injury, was not the same player for the Red Wings. And there's a lot of noise out there on him. And it's a lot of, he said, she said kind of thing. But it looks like the Walman and the team disagreed on where he was after he came back from injury. And it was one of those situations where Yzerman decided, fair or not, it's up to you to decide, he needed to move on. He needed a fresh start. And in the offseason, decided that the book is out on Walman. He's not the same player he was, and we are not going to unload him unless I sweeten it because I don't want to give another GM damaged goods or no one would take him, whatever. Attached the second that he got in a trade where he traded Gibson to the Predators for Kiiskinen and a second. So that second immediately got flipped to San Jose.
That trade worked out well, though.
That trade worked out well. So you might be, the way the Red Wings look at it is like, well, we just conjured that second out of thin air, so why does it matter? That said, I think multiple things are true here. I think Walman, as he is for the Sharks and now for the Oilers this season, that doesn't happen on the Red Wings. So that for one reason or another, and it's a big, complicated, messy thing, there needed to be a divorce there. I also think even if Yzerman decided he needed to move on from him, he didn't need to attach a second. It didn't need to happen right then. It's the offseason. You can be over the cap. Yzerman wanted to clear out space and like roster-wise and cap-wise. He was chasing other deals around free agency, and they didn't come to fruition. But even then, it didn't need to be a rush. Other GMs, it was Sean Shapiro's story where they said other GMs mentioned to him, like, if he was on waivers, we would have taken him kind of thing. I think it's a Walman, the team decided Walman needed to go. Sure, fine, whatever. It didn't need to be a second. I think it was a mistake. It's plain as that. Is it as big of a deal because of this first, or a bigger deal because of this first? I don't necessarily think so, because I don't think he's playing to get a first round level pick in Detroit this season, but that's a lot of hypotheticals, and I don't blame people for being frustrated by that one.
I won't relitigate it. You laid it out all pretty well there. Me personally, I don't care what happened behind the scenes. Whatever happened, happened. If they decide it was time for a divorce, sure, great. Okay. I got no problem with that. We can't know for sure. We'll never know for sure. It's fine. You gave up a second round pick, and then a year later, he's worth a first round pick. Like, that's the part I can't reconcile. GM, like you said, GMs were willing to claim him on waivers. He gave up a second round pick. The San Jose Sharks got a first round pick. That's the unacceptable part for me. Full stop. I don't give a crap about the behind the scenes stuff.
Yeah, the whole thing is just opening an old wound that was extremely emotional for fans because they loved Jake Walman. It's a tough one today. I'll say that. You guys have summed it up perfectly. I'd say I can completely understand why people feel the way they do, given the trade San Jose made today with Edmonton. It's a tough one to watch.
Yzerman said in the presser today, well, we're not getting into the realm of first and seconds for rentals. Well, okay, that I agree. Yeah, that's the right way to value those picks.
But what if you're the ones with the rentals?
And the thing is, like, okay, that's how you value a second, just to pick a random value pick out of nowhere. The way they approached that one was, okay, yeah, we have to attach something to get rid of him. We just conjured up a good prospect in a second round pick in a phenomenal trade, the Gibson Kiiskinen trade. Phenomenal. And so it doesn't matter that we gave up this second. Nobody, that's the part to me is like, it does. It does.
Because it's now their asset. They now have the pick. That's their asset to manage.
Hey, that second round pick could have got you Gustav Nyquist this week. You're adding to your team rather than unloading a guy. Not saying they should have done it, but you could have.
I don't agree. Like, I don't agree that they lost out on a first. Again, very clearly, on a personal player level, Walman and the Red Wings, there needed to be a divorce. Sure. But it's as simple as, one, this is just an old wound, new salt, and two, it was just a mistake at the time. I think the organization realizes the value lost there was, it just didn't need to happen. And even if you eventually needed to attach the second, it just didn't need to happen that fast at that point in the offseason. Simple as that.
We could have waived him then. If no one claimed him, then do the San Jose trade, right?
And then even optically, it's justifiable. We tried to give him away for free. Nobody took him. We had to add a sweetener. Like, again,
And give yourself the time, because if none of the signings panned out, then
we litigated the whole asset accumulation thing last episode when the Red Wings retained some cap space to get a 4th round pick. Insignificant, yes, but an asset to use. Under the radar, look at what Kyle Dubas did this week in Pittsburgh. He started with a red paperclip, and he is turning it into more and more assets. The Pittsburgh Penguins have the most draft picks in the next 3 drafts in the NHL.
somewhere Ron Hextall just shuddered.
Yeah. And he got Tommy Novak for basically nothing. Like, you look at, he's just making incrementally good trades. We're getting a little better. We're getting a little better. That's what that 2nd round pick could have been. You're just getting a little better. And then you flip that 2nd round pick for another guy, or you draft a player. And then again, you're good at drafting and developing. Having draft picks is a good thing. I can't relitigate this anymore. It was a bad move. There's no defending that move in terms of an asset management standpoint at this point. There's just no defending it.
Even if he had to go,
even if he had to go, I don't care. I don't need to know. It's terrible asset management.
For the sake of our mental health, let's move on. Mikko Rantanen, who ruined a lot of people's mental health this week, ends up moving on from the Carolina Hurricanes, goes to the Dallas Stars. And the deal was apparently done, but they couldn't come to terms on an extension in Dallas. It went away, came back all within the span of a few hours, and it ended up being 8/12. We were talking about Rantanen 14 plus. We were talking about Rantanen turning down 13 and a half elsewhere. And he takes 8/12. Again, no tax state, so that it's a different story in Dallas. But Colorado hates him. Carolina hates him now. Dallas makes what I think is a great deal, but so does Carolina. Actually didn't come out bad, because they get Logan Stankoven and they get 2 conditional firsts. It was a big haul that they got for Rantanen, and that was the whole thing. Like, how that played out, could you have predicted that?
No, this is absolutely insane. Like, no team has ever acquired a superstar in a year where they're trying to contend and then flipped him like almost immediately after. I don't know if any team's done that with any superstar, contending or not. It's like, Carolina confuses me a little bit. If you look at where they started this whole process, it was Nietzsche's and Drury that went to Colorado.
Yeah, there's other pieces involved, but in general.
But that was the only pieces of significance. Look at what they turned that into. They turned that into Stankoven, 2 firsts, 2 thirds. From a pure asset standpoint, they made a killing.
And they love their young, cost-controlled players. This is like their bread and butter. So they've just stretched their window out significantly by adding Stankoven plus 2 first-round picks.
And they've proven they can draft well. There was also a 2nd in the initial trade as well.
Yeah.
That I think is of value.
Still. But are they not going for it this year? They're a worse hockey team today than they were when they started. You can argue how substantially, what's the drop off from Necas to Stankoven? Obviously, it's fairly substantial.
This year especially.
Yeah. Like, I mean, I just did this whole tirade on asset management, but that's for where the Red Wings are. When you're a team that's going for the cup, are you going for the cup?
I think they realized that they weren't going to be able to sign Mikko Rantanen, and I think that really worried them. And they had to make a deal to secure the future, because if they walk out of that trade for Rantanen with nothing, I think fans, they go ballistic.
But they paid a perfectly reasonable rental price for Rantanen. All right, yeah, it sucks we can't extend him, but we're going for it this year, and he's going to help us do that. Now, you can argue the fit there didn't maybe look great. The underlying said he was fine, but okay, sure. But yeah, I again, asset to assets, they're coming out huge net positive here.
Did you hear Necas's comments? He's like, well, they should have probably known that before they traded for him.
He's not wrong.
I mean, he just said what everyone's thinking, right?
Yeah.
And the crux of this for Carolina, it all depends on what they do with those draft picks. If they can draft and develop and create some superstars with those picks, they're going to be loving this trade.
You know what it is? They're going to create stars with the 2 firsts, but they're also going to create stars probably with the 2 thirds as well.
And Stankoven is going to pop off for 85 points next year.
Let's talk about the Cozens trade, because Cozens was a guy, and I do think it came down to the Red Wings. Like, I don't know what Buffalo would have wanted, whether it was Casper or Casper was the offer early on, but that was the guy that the Red Wings were in on for a long, long time, and he ends up going to the Ottawa Senators. So in division still, and not to the Red Wings. It was, I don't want to call it a clear winner or loser. It's kind of one of those trades where both teams are taking risks. I do, in my opinion, think Buffalo spent a little bit more because they sent Dylan Cozens, Dennis Gilbert, and a second-round pick next year in exchange for Josh Norris, who has, I think, 5 years left after this one on his nearly $8 million deal, and Jacob Bernard-Docker. And to me, both Norris and Cozens come with their qualms, come with their warts as players. You lose a little bit of age by picking up Norris if you're Buffalo, not a lot. You lose a little production if you're Ottawa picking up Cozens.
As it stands now.
Yes. But the extra second, I was like, why add that in there? I don't know.
Maybe they just really love Jacob Bernard-Docker. Depth defenseman.
Well, I mean, I think that's part of it too, but it's one of those things where it's like whichever one of those guys, if either or maybe both, can find their form, that's who's going to win the trade.
They basically traded a lack of availability in Josh Norris because he's always hurt. I don't think he's ever played more than like 66 games or something like that. And they just traded it for the inconsistency of Dylan Cozens. So both teams are hedging their bet that they can fix those attributes. So I think this trade makes a lot of sense for them. Like, that's for Detroit, it didn't make a lot of sense. Obviously, it'd be great to bring in a Dylan Cozens, but I don't see how the assets work out. But for these two teams, it does for me.
Yeah, Buffalo gets slightly older, slightly more expensive. They give up the second round pick. I mean, the trade, if you just look at Cozens for Norris, makes all the sense in the world for the exact reason Evan just laid out. It's the why'd you give up the second that I can't wrap my head around. But
seems to be a
they're in Buffalo's in our division. We should know why they're giving up the second.
I know Adams is bad at his job. And again, if I look at Norris and Cozens, where if everything goes right for everybody involved, who's got the higher ceiling? It's Cozens. So
this was a safe trade. This is what it was for Adams. Adams was scared to make the move because every good player they trade away wins cups.
Yeah, that's one thing we didn't mention.
No risk of that in Ottawa.
Well, you've just clipped that because that might be doomed.
We have a lot of moments that are going to come back like sour milk from this episode, I think.
But listen, if I have to watch Brady Tkachuk lifting a Stanley Cup, that clip is far from the top of my concerns.
You will be in Florida in a couple of years when he demands a trade there.
Well, that's going to be upsetting for a whole lot of different reasons, but yes.
The Tkachuks, Marchand, Sam Bennett. Who else could they add?
Oh, my God.
Pull Matt Cook out of retirement.
If the Florida Panthers don't give away rats to throw on the ice with Marchand's face and Tkachuk's face, and
what are we doing?
You have to do it. Florida media, I don't know who on the Florida Panthers organization makes this decision. Just do it. I don't care if Bettman says you can't do that. We don't want those thrown on the ice. From a fan of the Detroit Red Wings, where the octopus was swung on the ice for decades when they were telling him to stop, just do it anyways.
Yeah.
Just do it. Okay, actually, speaking of which, Marchand does move from Boston to Florida. A 2027 second that will become a 2028 first if Marchand plays in 50% or more of Florida's games in the playoffs this year. So barring injury, that's going to be a first. In 2028, mind you, but when we'll all be dead anyways.
I assume that's the next first-round pick the Panthers actually have right now.
The way the Panthers are built, I wouldn't be surprised if you look in there, they randomly have 3 first-round picks next year or something. Like, that team is just...
No, they've given them all away. I'm fairly certain.
They're on the up and up. The Panthers
but they're in their window. It's perfectly... Like, I'm not saying it's a bad thing. They should be going all in. It's fine.
They have a 2027 first.
They have a 27? All right.
Yeah.
But, man, that's a tough one for Boston.
For the prices this year, maybe the injury's worse than we thought.
But even then, like...
You're ripping out one of the pillars of what your dynasty was of this franchise for a second-round pick. We obviously don't know what was happening behind the scenes that necessitated the trade or limited the trade.
I'm sure...
But you're You're taking a big piece out of what the Boston Bruins are and handing it to a divisional rival who you probably hate. They ended Patrice Bergeron's career in the playoffs, and you're just giving them Marchand.
I hope there's so many Bruins fans listening to this right now who are just now like gripping their wheels, sitting in terrible Boston traffic that goes nowhere because those roads were made by a blind person who's never even been in a car. Sorry, that was a whole... But you're right. Like,
you know what? If the Red Wings can't make the playoffs, I hope Boston just goes supernova, gets the second wild card or the first wild card, plays Florida in the first round. Just give it to me, right to my eyes.
Bennett, Marchand, Tkachuk, in the future, another Tkachuk. Like, oh my God. That is going to be the easiest team in the league to hate. Send Binnington to Florida.
Now we're talking.
Just do it. Other trades I think are notable here, and this one in the sense of these were the prices people were paying. Scott Laughton goes to the Leafs, $1.5 million retained. Other pieces in there, later picks, but in general, the Philadelphia Flyers get a 2027 first-round pick and Nikita Grabenkin back, but a 2027 first for a down-the-lineup depth center. A good one. Scott Laughton's a fine player, but those were the prices you were seeing.
Apparently, he's an unreal teammate and unreal locker room guy. So if he can actually, be in the lineup, help them out in the depth role, but also take the nerves off some of these guys, because the playoffs and playing in the playoffs as a Toronto Maple Leaf is very stressful, I'm sure. And they need a guy like that to take some of the edge off.
That's the kind of move where it made sense for the Leafs to do. Absolutely it did. And it also demonstrated the high prices. Brock Nelson got a first, a third, Callum Ritchie, Oliver Shillington, whatever you think of that. But that was a massive haul for Brock Nelson, who it was back and forth on whether he was even going to be traded.
And there was rumors that he turned down a 3-year, $7.25 million deal from the Islanders.
Expiring contract. You're getting 2 months. You hope, if you're Colorado, 2 months or more of Brock Nelson.
He's a great player.
Absolutely. Awesome player. The kind of player that you want for a cup run.
Callum Ritchie's kind of sick, though. And a first-round pick.
Could have drafted him.
How many of those do you got?
I don't know. My brain doesn't go much further back.
Brandon Carlo also made it to the Toronto Maple Leafs.
That one was a pretty good deal for them, I think, actually.
Colorado got Charlie Coyle from Boston. Speaking of Boston tearing it down, you mentioned Brad. Casey Middlestat, Zellers in a second going the other way. Casey Middlestat's a guy that we talked about it before. Is he a guarantee? No, he might just be like not what he was chalked up to be, but I would have liked a flyer on him. I think Boston did well to take a look at that one, especially if you had to move Coyle out no matter what.
The Red Wings have an equivalent to Charlie Coyle.
Comfer would be the closest, except Coyle's actually kind of good still.
And the contract is scary for Comfer, so what's the value going to be there? All in all, I think there's going to be more conversation about the trades in future episodes too, next episode as well, but those were some of the big ones, and the prices were high. There weren't a million different deals, but the ones that happened seemed to be very few steals out there. Very few steals. All right, quick couple of notes before we jump into overtime here. The Red Wings, obviously, we mentioned they played Utah. I'm not going to recap the whole game just for the sake of time, but started off great. They looked better than they did. They outshot them by a ton. I think we saw the best version of Dylan Larkin that we've seen in a long time. Scored a sweet goal, falling with style. Berggren scored the other goal, but the Utahs just took advantage of all their opportunities. Yeah, they lost 4-2. The biggest story of the game was Carter Mazur in front of like an incredible contingent of supporters. Jackson, Michigan native. We were so excited to see him make his debut. Got called up. Incredible story for Carter Mazur. And on his second or third shift, just awkwardly goes into a board on a hit. Seems like he hyperextends his elbow and dislocated his elbow, is on IR, is out now. And that is just he was out so long term with that upper body injury. Brutal break for him. And now yet another one. I just such a gut punch.
I had forgotten that happened, so I'm sad that you're making me feel that emotion again because, he's been on our show a couple times. He's such a great guy, great personality, just so level-headed. And, it's amazing that he got to, play his first NHL game with all his family there. It's just so unfortunate how that all played out. I feel so bad for him.
And if you think about what the Red Wings need and what they were looking for when they called him up, like he plays with edge, he plays with a spark. He's the kind of guy who's going to go out there and play the kind of game that Steve Yzerman talked about.
And he's been in great form in Grand Rapids. Like this was a very well-deserved promotion to the Red Wings. And man, it's just so tough.
He's, you know what, like we haven't seen the last of Carter Mazur. He said that, his dad said that online. I believe that. You talk to the guy a couple times, you fully know that, like he loves the game, hates to lose, wants to piss off everyone but his teammates kind of thing. It's the exact kind of guy you want out there. We haven't seen the last of him. And I just hope that, he can come back bigger and stronger and better, and looking forward to it. All right. We are going to take a quick break here. And when we're back, the final segment here on the Winged Wheel podcast.
We're going to overtime.
Overtime is brought to you by our Patreon supporters, patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast if you want to support the show. Again, the giveaways, the bonus overtime episodes, the 2 tickets to every Detroit Red Wings home game, the Discord, all of that and lots more, and you allow us to do everything we do on this show. And frankly, if you hated what we said today, you're even closer, so you can yell at us on the Discord. You can send us DMs. It's a good time.
That's true.
Some questions from our patrons, and there's a lot of them, so for anyone that aren't captured today, we're going to be taking them to the Patreon exclusive overtime. But Frank's Stanley's Cup says, here's to picking 11th for 2 more years. Thanks, Frank. Hated that. Hopefully this joke ends soon. July 1st has to be big game hunting, right? Are we closer to another rebuild than we would like to believe? Here's where I think the vibes are coloring a lot of, again, justifiably, but the vibes are coloring a lot of the opinion right now. The Red Wings just won 14 plus games, like 14 games in a row in 2 different streaks. And we saw a lot of not what made us believe they were a contender this year, but what sets them up for the future. You have your core. Yeah, Larkin's not young as the rest of the core, so that might come into question depending on how long this goes. But you have your core. You have a couple ancillary pieces, and you look at Danielson or Sandin Pellikka and MBN, and you need at least a couple of them to hit. You have Cossa, you need him to hit, Augustine as well. But you see how you're close. But I do agree, you need to start big game hunting one way or another here. You just need to. You can't exist in this purgatory for a lot of different reasons. It's for a different episode, but for the one I just mentioned, you need to know Dylan Larkin's age, and I know everyone loves the whole Steve Yzerman didn't win for a long time thing. Dylan Larkin's not Steve Yzerman, and this isn't the same NHL anymore. There's a salary cap now. You want to make the most use of that before you start to, have to look in different directions. Udalali says, what would be a better outcome for the Wings this summer, winning the draft lottery or overhauling the entire pro scouting department? The draft lottery, without a doubt.
They're actually good at drafting, though, in the first round.
Yeah, but you know who's even better than an efficient first round pick at like 9th or 11th or 14th overall? Misa, Hagens, Martone. You know what I do for Misa on this team right now?
Are you going to say that for the Patreon exclusive?
Yeah.
You know how I know our pro scouting department's bad? I'd still go with Misa, but I considered it. I actually had to think about it.
Yeah. Jason Thompson says, would this have been easier to understand if instead of the second win streak they'd gone 4-3, they weren't equipped to compete for the wild card, and short of trading a third for Quinn Hughes, they weren't going to be. That being said, they need to get in next season or Steve needs to update his resume. I'm tired of this dance.
No, it was better to be in the position they're in, because here's the thing. When I saw the prices of this market, I immediately went sell, 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 and then I remembered they don't have anybody to sell. They were going to be right where they are no matter what.
Jasper DeBoer says, how many teams does Florida body with this top 6? Verhaeghe, Barkov, Reinhart, Marchand, Bennett, Tkachuk.
Dear God. Without exactly seeing what Dallas's top 6 are, that's at worst 2?
Dear God, Moose God, I don't care what God you pray to. That is going to be, you're going to get very little help on the ice. Like, Florida's going to have to either be gassed or injured or whatever to not be a favorite in most series that they're in. If you're the Edmonton Oilers and you have ambitions of making the finals again, you're looking at Florida loading up going, oh my God, what are we supposed to do about that?
You got to get through your conference first, which is looking like a task.
Yeah.
Trent Frederick and Jake Walman. You kidding me? That's a cup right there.
Sam Miggs says, do you think Craig Smith fits our depth needs more than Joey V? Is getting Petr Mrazek back very funny for anyone else or just me? Yes and yes.
Yeah.
Can they sell the Adidas jerseys that they probably have in a storage locker somewhere?
There's some Mrazek jersey havers out there who are probably thrilled right now.
Absolutely.
They're digging through, or they're pissed that they sold it or got it like swapped out at Vintage Detroit for a different number.
They got duct tape Lyon over top of the name bar and they're just ripping it off. Oh my God, those Direct Mrazek jerseys are going to be useless. He's not getting his number back.
Maybe he can be like Jack Rossovic and get a Rolex and he's going to get his own number back.
You'll see who the true Petr Mrazek believers are at the LCA.
Yeah, because he was 34 when he was with Detroit.
Man.
Interesting.
Imagine getting a sweet rollie just for loaning your number out for what, a few weeks, was it?
Every free agent in the NHL is looking at like the big names that are available going, I'm going to take 91 just in case.
Named after the perfect human says $10 to the Jamie Daniels Foundation if Ryan proclaims the Bruins' downfall is finally here. Oh, hell yeah. The Bruins are done. It is over for them. This generation of the Bruins is toast. They are going to be bad for a cycle here.
He hasn't learned.
I say dumb shit on this podcast for free. If I can get $10 for charity out of it.
And if you're wrong, that means maybe they make the playoffs and they play Florida.
Right?
We all win in this.
That's right. Tatayev Jersey Haver says, while playoffs were never the expectation with how hot the team was playing coming out of the deadline, without bringing in some level of support feels like a really bad message to the room. Am I crazy to think the Wings should have committed to something substantial at the deadline? So, I mean, we talked about what it would have taken because Yzerman did try. He also said, too, like they looked in terms of replacing Kopp. He was like, we wanted to find a second line center, maybe with who is more offensively minded or creative, or if not, then a winger. But we saw the prices for those guys. And so that feeds into what we mentioned, like multiple first prospects, whatever. But I think Craig Smith is a good ad and he'll bring something down the lineup. Veleno was well liked. Christian Fischer, like on the ice, I'm sorry, hate to say it, just a ton of cardio this season. But in the room, especially Fish, extremely well liked.
But that's the thing, too. Fischer and Veleno were very well liked. They're gone. That's a message.
Yeah.
Saying, hey, guys, this ain't going the way we want it to go. Get your crap together or a couple more of you going out the door in the summer. Buyouts, trades, whatever. Like, a little bit of fear isn't bad for an NHL team, especially when they're on a 4-game skid.
There is something to be said about, like, I'm a firm believer, and I said it last episode, the one before, this team is what it is. And so the fact that they're going through what they are right now when they have a little bit of a cold streak from Larkin and Raymond, it's not surprising. But at the same time, the beauty of hockey is that it's an emotional sport and you can have all the excuses and the objective arguments you want. And at the end of the day, like everyone would say, you got to buck up. You got to go out there and find a way to win games and you got to grind it out, especially when it's March. And you want us to go out and add a Scott Laughton? Earn it.
Oh, it's the hardest remaining schedule. No one cares. No one cares. You're big boys. You're big boys. You make millions of dollars to play a sport. Go out there and get the job done.
You know who's not a playoff team? Utah. You just lost to them.
And you watch.
Hard schedule my ass. Beat the teams that are out of the playoffs then.
Yeah, it gets tougher now. They're on the road.
And now they're behind.
You know what's coming, right?
Ripping off another 7-game
Another 7-game heater. And
You're welcome. You're welcome.
We're going to be 4 prospect profiles in, and it'll all be according to plan.
What's more likely, the Wings ripping off another 7-game heater, or Ovi pops all 10 tonight to hit the record?
And as we record, that game has started. So I know this is going to sound weird without talking about, oh my God, they're winning the game. It's 1-0 right now.
For
the Red Wings.
Ooh.
Dylan Larkin.
Larkin, he's back, baby.
Yeah, so we're
we didn't talk about it during the Utah game. That line was, at least for long stretches of the game, flying.
Yeah.
Like Marco was doing some stuff, Raymond was doing some stuff, and that's the most Dylan Larkins look like Dylan Larkin since pre-Four Nations.
Yeah. Okay, we're going to let this go. We're going to go catch up on that game. and record our bonus overtime as well. Thank you so much for tuning in. Schedule for the next little while is going to be weird. Nothing on Sunday, potentially something Tuesday night, Thursday. It's going to be a weird week. Bear with us. Follow us on socials. Thank you to all of you for tuning into this episode of the Winged Wheel Podcast. If you were angry, excited, sad, whatever, we're happy that you spent your time listening to the show and hanging out with us. To the sponsors of the Winged Wheel Podcast, thank you so much for sponsoring the show. To all of our Patreon supporters, we could not do this without you. And to all of our name level supporters on Patreon, actually, I first should say patreon.com/wingedwheelpodcast. And if you want to support, but Patreon's not for you, subscribe and leave a rating or review wherever you get your podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, the stars, the thumbs up, tell a friend about the show. All that helps. Name level supporters on Patreon: Arjun Shankar, Yves Bartels on behalf of the Sarah Grand Foundation, Akefer, THL Champ, Samuel Soderholm, Icon, Glenn Brabham, Sea Lion, Matthew M. Rice, Adam Rose, Adam Zoiza, Admiral Matt S. of the Cheesebag Navy, Alex Toger, Anna Sleeman, Asher Killian, Beer League Legend, Best James Bond, Bingo Bango, Carl Brutinanuski, CB55, Citizen High Five, Clip Clop Nene, Connor Scovey, Craig Kibble, Denny's Gamer Girl, Derek Enstam, DJ Denton, Eric Hill, Evans, Recurring Hemorrhoid, brand new name of the supporter. Oh, I guess they're theorizing why you were missing.
Oh.
Give Blood Fight Probert, Goose Looney's Drinking Club, Grand Rapids Girly, Griffin God Creatives, Hattrick Sandine Pelika, Hockeytown Love, Hockeytown Matt, Hassam Al Qassem, Jay Gollum, Jacob Turner, James McLean, aka Jambo, Jeff Pridemore, Jennifer Morris, John Ingalls, Jonathan Miller, Kaylin Wood, Lunchbox, Matt Keeler, Matt McKay, Mark Hernandez, Marty, Michael Edlin, Mr. Kuzi, Now I Have to Learn How to Click on a Macintosh, Podgy713, RA, Richard Perkins, Roy Donk, Ryan Britt, Sam Bankson, Skeletor, Slim Smitty Cards, Stephen Ortlieb, That's What I Appreciate About You, Walman's Elite Dancing D, Wings Fan in Chicago, Eyes Are Playing Stan, Aaron Hudson, General Indy Bohan of the Cheesebag Army, AA Ron, Aaron Taylor, All Motor No Hands, Ann Stanislavski, Bellingham Massiballs, Bex, C.E. Hayes, Chim Kim Nuggets, Chris Felinsky, Commander Ben Barron of the Cheesebag Space Force, Connor Layton, and Corey Prida, Darren Fick, Datsuk, Stangleberries, Drop the Puck, Dylan Larkin, Trade Sacrifice, Eric Nance, Evan Beckner, Frank, Stanley's Cup, Gene Sullivan, Grepsky, Griffey Boy, I Want Moe's German Sausage, brand new name level supporter. Thank you for that. James Pridemore, Johnny Page, Jeremiah Dobo, Jim, JM, Rhapsody, Josh Yelchin, Chaotic Monkey, Kevin McCracken, Claus, Larkin's Loyal Lemming, Linda Hull, Lonnie Zone, Lucas Raymond, mid-level patron and a 4th round pick, Mitch Minier, Noted Soderblom, Worshipper, Joey Jojo Shabadoo, O Ophelia, As Good As It Gets, Ryan M, Sam Miggs, Sandy P, Right Hand D, Steven, That Other Guy, The Hodag, The Hat 123, Trent Thurl, Vladimir Tarasenko, more like Badimir Terrible Stanko, Wings Fan in St. Louis, Scott, and your second favorite patron. Thank you all so very much. That was a trade deadline, huh?
Thanks for tuning in to the Winged Wheel Podcast. Be sure to visit wingedwheelpodcast.com, where you'll find links to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. You'll also find ways to support the show, like Patreon, official podcast merchandise, and more. And don't forget to follow us on X at Winged Wheel Pod, at Ryan Hanna, WWP, at Brad Crisco, and at Hockeytown Evan, as well as Winged Wheel Podcast on Instagram.